Today, though, you've heard a lot about veterans and about different types of projects that are going on there. So we want to actually focus a little bit on caregivers and healers, hidden and underserved. So our entire team is, not our entire team, actually, there's about another 15 of us or so back up from New Hampshire and New England area. We've been really honored to be able to serve thousands of veterans, first responders, and their families. So we want to just take a deep dive, and you can look up our program and what we do. I'm on the HHRF Education Committee over here with Deborah, and we have a ton of fun. So, Cheryl, sorry. So we have a ton of fun. So welcome, let's just get started. So again, I'm Tara Mahoney, and today what we're going to talk about are a few things. First is underserved and undefined. Who are the hidden heroes? And why are they underserved and undefined? Next, we're going to jump into post-traumatic stress disorder, which actually then is post-traumatic stress, which then is actually post-traumatic growth, and what that actually means. We heard Wendy talk a little bit about the importance of theories and theoretic orientation. So I'm just going to jump in a little bit about how you can find out a little bit more about caregivers and the theories that we're going to base it on, but we're not going to spend a ton of time on that. Please just reach out to us if you want to take a deeper dive into that. Next, we're going to talk about why equine assisted services and this call to action. So let's just get a little bit of information about what our scope of practice is, veterans. How many veterans do you think there are in the US today? Can I get an idea? 21 million. How many veterans are under the care of a caregiver? 5.1 million. How many veterans have caregivers that are post 9/11 veterans? Any guesses? 1.2 million caregivers. Very different population, right? So these are younger, these are maybe girlfriends, boyfriends, any of that. How many veterans are actually actively served through the VA right now? 9 million. That makes the VA the largest healthcare system in the United States. How many VA providers are there? How many doctors do you think there are for 9 million? 15,000. How many nurses? 61,000. So no wonder why it's overwhelmed, right? Yeah. My sister's a ER doc with the VA, and it's just horrendous what she's like, I want to do so much more, so really difficult role. Okay, so actually before we jump into this, we're kind of lucky. We have a great team here. Our team is veterans, healers, caregivers. Kelly is here with us today to tell a little bit about her story just as a caregiver, and I'm just going to turn it over to Kelly and give you a few minutes just to tell your story a little bit. So.
Hey everyone. On July 13th of 2008, I got a phone call. It was my son. He sounded kind of weird. And he had 2 weeks left of a 15-month deployment. It was the one cycle the military decided they would try and see if they could do 15 months. And he said, well, I got hurt. And I'm like, okay. So I'm thinking he was loading the transpose to come home and fell in a hole and broke his ankle or something. And he was like, no, Ma, you haven't seen the news? I'm like, no, I'm with Nana Papa. And he's like, well, he says, I'm in a chopper. I got blown up. I'm in a chopper en route to Jalalabad. They think they should be able to save my leg. And so instantly I kind of knew life was going to change for all of us, and it did. He was operated on in Jalalabad. They then stabilized him, got him to the launch stool, operated there, finally stabilized him. 5 days later, I was able to meet him at Walter Reed. It took me everything not to just get on a plane to fly to Germany. So my husband and I met him at Walter Reed. It was funny because I kind of just packed, and I had all tops and shoes and like no underwear or bottoms. It was terrible. So finally get to see him. His wounds were pretty extensive, and life has never been the same since. I spent 6 months there with him. My husband was there for the first 2 weeks. And I basically walked away from our family business, my home, our farm, And my whole life became dedicated to making sure my son got the best of everything and that he was gonna be okay. So I didn't matter at all, my husband didn't matter. So fast forward, he doesn't need me anymore. He's doing good, I go home, and my husband doesn't recognize me anymore. I no longer have a purpose because here I was saving lives and helping other soldiers and other families, and I was really good at it, but I was no longer good at what my life used to be. And I got very depressed, isolated. My husband and I grew far apart. Our son came home. There was a lot of anger and resentment, and here he is, an alpha male who just survived one of the deadliest battles in Afghanistan. 9 were killed, 27 were wounded, 75% casualty rate. And I learned all this in this time I'm home. I do a deep dive and everything horrible. I couldn't go to my husband, couldn't go to friends, couldn't go to family. My mother accused me of it was my fault because I let him sign up. So the only place I could cry was out with my horse. The 2,000-pound Belgian named Pete, and I could go out there and I could sit in his stall and he would put his head in my lap and I would sob, and that was the only place I could do that. And so we decided we needed help because we were falling apart completely as a family. So we got a civilian counselor who knew nothing about military culture. She was lovely, kind, compassionate, but she gave us really bad advice, given the circumstances. And things got worse. We ended up being estranged from our son for over 3 years, during which time he got married and had a baby. And finally, he was due to get quite an award, and we got a call from a high-up military person to congratulate us. And we said, thank you very much, we're very proud, but we haven't seen him and talked to him in 3 years. And he was like, don't go anywhere, just stay there, let me make a phone call. And within 3 hours, there was a person from a veterans organization and a pastor who was a veteran sitting on our front porch, and they spent 5 hours with my husband and I. And that was the beginning of healing our family. My husband and I came together to work our team of horses again, which helped heal us. We were able to reconcile with our son, which is a miracle. He now works for us and will be eventually taking over our business. And I knew I wanted to work with horses and veterans. It was such a passion. And I was introduced to Tara, which was life-altering. She was the real deal. I could see she not only was helping veterans, but she was including the caregivers and the families. Because like in our case, our son got better and he was thriving far before we were. It was kind of confusing, but then I talked to a lot of parents and heard that story a lot. That they were kind of assumed that they were fine. They went home to their lives and they were the ones who were gonna be fine. And there were tons of services for the veterans and none for the families, or the loved ones, or the girlfriend, or the grandparents. And this has been a perfect fit.
Thanks for sharing your story, Kelly. Thanks. And she's right. So what we really need to do is hear these stories, right? Today we heard what is the theory and what are the stories, and how important it is. Thank you all so much for holding this space for Kelly, right? And honoring her service. So what we do when we take this kind of information is now where do we go with it? So we want to move on a little bit and go from PTSD. And so we look at some of the models of PTSD. And one thing that Kelly had said was, she's like, I knew my son would have PTSD. I mean, one of the most famous battles. I didn't know I would. So how do we then be able to say to people, yeah, stand in that? So the D is the disorder, right? Do you make clinical criteria? And Kelly said, yeah, heck yeah, I did. And many of the families we work with. So when you hear these stories, it's not just for families of veterans, parents of autism, parents with cerebral palsy, we have all of that. What is the trauma? A massive car accident, a later in life injury or illness. So we have great models, DBT, prolonged exposure therapy, all of those things that help with the disorder. What we want to do is get people to go working through. So now it's the social and experiential. This is where so the medical field really has a role, and medication and all of that has a role in the PTSD. This is where equine assisted services can jump into the PTS. So that's working it through. That's getting that experiential, visceral, all of those types of things. That's building on another model. And now what you want is post-traumatic growth. So we really try to refer when we're talking to people that it's not a disorder, it's a very normal reaction to a very abnormal situation. How are you growing through it? And Kelly showing up, all of us showing up, Angie's a veteran, all of us, our team, that's the growth. And that's what we want to empower people to do. And that's what we want you to get your clients into. Whether it's with autism, whatever it is how do you get those families and those healers through there? So a few theories, the middle range theory of chronic sorrow. This is not really fun to talk about, chronic sorrow, but here we are, we're talking about disparity of loss. Wait, why us? What happened? The loss of that perfect child, right? A 23-year-old shouldn't have their legs blown up. Or, my son shouldn't, is my son with autism going to be able to get married and be in love and have those experiences? So then we also look at the model of stress and adaptation. That's a really interesting one. That's more on kind of what is the cognitive part of this, and then what is it getting into the behavioral modification. So again, that's now kind of more into the horse piece. These models were actually designed for nursing students on how do they then help the families. Because we know how to work with patients, right? Nurses especially. Linda is actually a healer, so she works in a medical facility and rehab center, and she gets patients right out of ICU and all of that. But it's also the family that's coming in to visit that has a ton of questions and a ton of information. So as you heal the patient, you also have to heal the entire family system, whatever that might look like. Another one is uncertainty in illness. So I'm not going to jump into a ton of theory. Let's just kind of get more into what we're doing. But uncertainty in illness, how much worse is it going to get? Wait, Tuesday was great. Why does Thursday suck? All of that kind of confusion, right? And it's just kind of, why are these 3 weeks bad? And now it's going really well. So that uncertainty. This is very different from a traumatic loss. This is over a continuum and often a lifespan. So what we want to get then into is the theory of resilience and relational load. So resilience, oh my gosh, that's a fantastic term. Do we all want to say we have resilience in our programs? What does that even mean? How do we define it? How do we measure it? What are the outcomes? What's the data to support it? So when we're looking at resilience, we're looking at biopsychosocial, right? How intact is that person? Some people are fantastic in a crisis and run towards it, but then do they have a social support network to run the business or to, take care of the other kids while you're taking care of the patient? Spiritual, psychology just doesn't talk about spirituality, right? We talk about moral injury for the person who's going through it, but what is that spiritual, that depth and that resource? Where do you find that meaning and purpose in possibly something really bad that's happened? Financial, oh my gosh, we don't talk about this, but it's a lot of money. Do you lose your job? Are you trying to work 3 extra jobs to pay for that medication? Or do you stop the pain meds because you've got to pay for the antibiotics? This is really complicated, so financial is really important to consider. Relational load, this was COVID, right? How many of us were clapping for those doctors and those nurses and oh my gosh, society's behind you? It was not spread out and distributed evenly while we were doing puzzles, right? How many did puzzles during COVID? They were really expensive, weren't they? I was like, these are expensive puzzles. Anyway, so that is relational load mutually shared. That's also in a family. Is dad taking care of all the finances? Is grandpa taking care of all the other kids? Is mom taking care of, just the patient? What is the relational load? Is that spread? Is it dispersed? Does everybody feel there's some equity there? Now, socio-cultural distribution of stress. How accessible is stuff in the environment? So can that veteran who might have be in a wheelchair actually get through the grocery store? Can they even get to the grocery store if it's not open enough? So COVID, remember they had the elderly hours, right? So that's a sociocultural response as a distribution. So we can get more into that if anybody has questions at the end. So here's a place that's doing it great. Travis Mills Foundation is up in Maine. Travis Mills, oh my gosh, absolutely hilarious. Check him out on TikTok. One of 5 quadruple amputees in the country. his TikTok, I should have done it. He has a fireworks going off on 4th of July with his son, and he says, you know, be careful with fireworks, kids. And then it explodes, and he's lying on the ground with none of his limbs. I met him, and his hand fell off. And I was like, you're testing me. I'm picking up the screws, and he's like, you got screwed by Travis. Oh, yeah. So anyway, so they're doing it right. So they created a sanctuary for families and everyone to be able to come up there and snowmobile, kayak, all of that. So we run a few programs for their caregivers. This one was with the wives. We did another one with the moms. Come from all over the country. Lady, ringmaster of the shit show. So completely competent, absolutely. I've got this, I'm in charge of my whole thing. Terrified. And she had to have that choice of I'm only working with a mini, I'm not gonna ride. So how important is choice in any of this when you're dealing with chronic illness? So we're gonna jump into trauma as dysregulation and disconnection. So if anybody asks you what's that simple definition of trauma, it's the physiological dysregulation, okay? So a lot what happens when we're dysregulating, why the horse works, if someone asks you why the horse, is it's the biofeedback of the horse in that dysregulation. Let me say that again. It works because the horse gives biofeedback for the human's dysregulation. Warmer temperature, slower heartbeat, slower respirations, lower cortisol levels, all of those things. So whenever you're hanging out with a best friend and all of a sudden you realize you're both crossing your legs and doing the same thing, that's the mirroring. That's what mirroring means. So we, just by being within, 5-10 feet of a horse, we are gonna get that biofeedback. So what we do in our program is the first 30 minutes, actually, we put someone in a stall or, in an area, and they're just standing there with maybe we have singing bowls or someone doing a flute, and they're just grooming the horse. That's it. And so we're allowing that dysregulation to get centered. The next thing is disconnection. So that's based on attachment theory, and we can go into a little bit on there, but you're gonna disconnect from yourself, you're disconnecting from others, you're disconnecting from time and place, and you're disconnecting from your meaning and purpose. So what we want to do, we know as therapists that the way that we actually work with clients, whether you're Gestalt or Freudian or whatever, the number one thing is your therapeutic alliance. Any research shows if they have a therapeutic alliance with you. Well, guess what? Veterans have a really hard time. Caregivers and healers have a hard time with therapeutic alliance. So we get that therapeutic alliance first with the horse. We step away, get that therapeutic alliance with the horse, connect, then you start to regulate. So what happens, which it would sound great if we had spa music going on and everything. We had this cop a year ago, and he's terrified of horses. He's like, the other cop challenged me, and you have to go through this horse thing. He's like, it's fine, I'll go to the horse thing. So we put him in a stall, and everybody's got the spa music going on, his knees are shaking and everything. The way he tells it, we stuck him in a stall with an 18-hand stallion in a 6-foot stall, and not at all. She was 31. She's actually Brenda's horse, little tiny alley, 30, and it was a 15-foot stall. So threat appraisal is what will happen with this population. Caregivers and healers, that is what they are trained to do. What is the threat appraisal? When I'm with my kid in the movie theater, when I'm with my veteran at Walmart, how bad's it gonna be at this restaurant? Do they need to sit with their back near there? So threat appraisal is what's going to happen when this population shows up at your farm. So then what you wanna do, that's why you do the emotional regulation. They're gonna reset with the emotional regulation, you're gonna give them that opportunity. Then they're gonna have some flexibility in coping. All of a sudden, oh gosh, actually I can keep my feet safe and it's not gonna rear up and it's not gonna, okay, actually this is okay. You have to give enough time for that flexibility of coping and chip in. After then, you start to get this optimism, like, I got this, so cute, that kind of thing. So now there's the optimism. And then we get into the next part of the wheel, self-enhancers. That's, it was the stallion, and that's where you build the efficacy. Next step, this wheel needs to keep going around and around to keep happening. Now you've groomed. Okay, now we're gonna lead the horse. Threat appraisal, right? Then we're getting into the regulation. We're gonna lead the horse around some cones. Then from there, it's gonna keep on going into it. Then you're gonna step it up again. Now let's lead over obstacles. Then maybe in the afternoon, we're actually gonna tack up and ride. Threat appraisal, right? So that's gonna be, are they allowed to just jump on a horse? Or is it, go find a helmet? Oh, okay, I'm keeping myself safe. Okay, this is what a mounting block is. We're checking the girth. So you let them be a part of that process. So caregivers specifically, you want to have connection, you want to have choice. Do they have to do all of that? No. You know, if they say they want to just keep groom, because they don't have choice so much, right? They don't have that option to be able to say, I get to tap out of this. You don't get to tap out of it when, you know, your paraplegic, you know, 27-year-old son needs something. You don't get to tap out. In programs, it's really important to offer that choice. So a 20-minute session instead of 90-minute, doesn't matter. Absolutely have choice. Another thing you can have choice with is, in our programming, we have probably 4 or 5 things that they can choose from. Do you want to ride? Do you want to do groundwork? Do you want to do carriage driving or ground driving? Do you want to do bushcraft? Maybe you don't like horses at all, but you know your spouse dragged you here. So whatever it might be, there's a lot of different. There might be some art activities. You know, there might be. So have that diversity. Be able to have choice. Would you rather help cook? Competency. So now they're building up that competency, not confidence. Very, very different. Right? So competency is that really that ownership of I did this. So you might have sidewalkers and equine specialists and horse handlers there, but the idea is to hand that over. Know your horses enough and maybe be in a contained area to start. So where are they gonna go? Okay, you got it. Let go if you need to let go. You know, other things they can't let go of. Caregivers and healers cannot let go when someone's coding, right? Linda talks about that all the time. So she does the evening shift, and I'll tell the story for you. And she's like, one alarm will go off, you know, with this elderly person who gets out of bed. And then the one across the hall is like, I'm getting my alarm off too, because they want the attention. And now all of a sudden it's become chaos, right? But how can she have the competency to know, how am I doing this? So healers and caregivers have to be competent all the time. So you want to give them the chance to decide, how am I? That's a very big difference. So do they need that sidewalker to stay with them the entire time? Do they need to have that pressure speech and keep talking and walking with them? So here's another one that we did, Azimuth Check Foundation. It's a Green Beret Foundation, and we were at Brenda's farm, actually, Lad Farm, 200 acres overlooking this incredible lake. It's just, the moment you get there, you start to you feel better. I'll give you her address if anybody needs a location.
I keep the bar locked.
Yeah. So here we did with caregivers. So actually, this guy is 78-year-old Vietnam veteran, combat, and he's the caregiver for a 94-year-old World War II veteran. And the way he came to us was the other veteran on there says she's the caregiver for him, who's the caregiver for him. So right, there's that whole scaffolding and how are they building their community. Now then, how do we support them to get into post-traumatic growth, right? So she brought him thinking that she was there to help him, and actually she had the most difficult day. And we had to, you know, really support her a lot more. So we decided to bring in fun. Oh my gosh, this is supposed to be fun, right? So we're gonna joust with, you know, we actually took two huge rails first, ground poles, and told them they were jousting with that, you know, just because, you know, she wasn't anxious enough. And then switched it out on them. Having fun. Curiosity, we all keep talking about curiosity. How do we tell people what curiosity is? Like, curiosity, I don't wanna be curious about what I'm going through. I just want to do it. So we let the horse be curious, and then that shows them, oh, curiosity can be really fun. Can we knock a ball off? You don't have to, but let's see. So know your horse and know what that person's level of comfort is there. You can see that, you see a little extra pair of legs. She needed a sidewalker with her. You can see he didn't, but you see the sidewalker with the other veteran. So they each chose how much support they needed. I think she was still on lead, actually, both of them. Okay, so how am I doing on time? 25 minutes, good. So now we want to talk about, everybody knows the 5 freedoms, right? Good, nodding? All right, I'll cover it real quick. Hunger and thirst. So this is the gold standard for animal care. They should have freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain, injury, and disease, freedom from it to be able to express normal, natural behavior, and then freedom from fear and distress. It's typically in that order, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Shelter, all your basics, up to actualization, you know, fear and distress is kind of a higher process. With caregivers and healers, all they can really give is freedom from hunger and thirst. Let's actually really think about that. So imagine if you can only offer your animal freedom from hunger and thirst, but not from discomfort. You know that therapy is going to be really, really painful. Learning to walk again, it's going to be really difficult. You know pain, injury, and disease are now part of their everyday life. Any of you ever get injured? Like, we've all had something happen. And how long does that last? Oh my gosh, how much more is my back gonna hurt? You know, how bad is my knee gonna ache when it starts to rain? So we don't have that necessarily that caregivers and healers can provide. Expressing normal and natural behavior after a catastrophic injury, it's not gonna be normal or natural anymore. And what do you do with that? Do you just redefine what that is? Certainly, you know, maybe your family gets a minivan instead of the, you know, sports car. Or how do you then now compensate to say what is normal and natural behavior? Do you have to make modifications in your house? What kind of behaviors do you have to change? Can you go out for 4 hours with a bunch of girlfriends wondering if they're okay, right? Fear and distress. As a caregiver, there's always going to be fear and distress, right? And there's always going to be fear and distress as a healer. You know, Linda always says, you know, like you just sit there and you wait until that alarm goes off. And what is that like? Constantly. So our healers and our caregivers do not get the 5 freedoms that we would expect for our horses. And we have to go into this process when we are dealing with this population with that information. Otherwise, we are not in the scope of practice that we should be in. So be sure when you are running a program and you see mom sitting out in the car, that she might actually either be isolated, or that might be the first 45 freaking minutes she's gotten alone, and she's in there with the heat on reading a romance novel, right? You need to assess what is actually happening with that person, so you're aware of the whole system. Because then if you're bringing either that veteran or that other patient that you might be, and you haven't attended to the caregiver, we don't know what's gonna happen. Will that therapeutic outcome stay if now the caregiver's burnt out or the healer is not able to do that? You know, I should also say that healers, we also include first responders as well. So, you know, very difficult times for law enforcement, very difficult times. And there's a lot of myths with it, but whatever your political stance is on it, you know, walking up to a car late at night, that's a very difficult situation. You don't know what kind of, you know, are they gonna beg and be like, oh my gosh, please don't give me a ticket? Or is it gonna be a dangerous situation? We actually just lost a police officer in New Hampshire who was just monitoring traffic, and a huge truck crashed in and killed him with an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old. So you just don't know. That looks like an easy job when you know that that's that high risk. And now every single police officer in New Hampshire who has road duty, think about what that's going to be like for them in the next 6 weeks, 6 months. So we've got to really pay attention to that. So the 5 freedoms, I want to pitch it over to Brenda for a second, because Brenda is our equine behavior specialist. She's actually an expert in this, incredible to have on your team. Ask her tons of questions because she could give an entire day program on this. She studied with the best, like Martin Black and the Pirellis. And one of the things that she always says, well, actually, she says a lot. Two of the things that she says is, my job is to offer comfort to the horse. And when they say, when people hear her say, my only job is to offer comfort to my horse, all of a sudden people start to integrate that and say, oh, is my only job to offer comfort to myself or to the group? And then the other thing she says is, I'm gonna make you look cool too. You know, so she's like, put on your sunglasses, pose this way when you're taking your picture, you know? And so we had a little bit of fun. But Brenda, when you're working with your horses and you're assessing who's in the program, she has 9, 8, 10?
It depends.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes we bring in 16 or 20 if we're having a really big program. But in the morning, she spends a lot of time looking at exactly these things. And you'll notice, right, like at night, how are their experiences? How is the herd? Do you want to speak a little bit about just how the animals then are going to reflect into the group?
Well, we spend a lot of time just talking about the needs of the participants and what horse might most likely get along with them. And that is exactly what I say. I say the only thing I have to offer a horse is to help them feel good. And I've learned recently that that is really a form of co-regulation. and that everything I do on my property that's designed to make my horses feel good helps the people feel good. From the way they come in, to the way they're touched, they're handled, the way people interact with each other, how you walk across the arena. It's all designed to not disrupt the re-regulation and the process that Tara has set up. So it's very, very neat collaboration.
And she has a really neat way of mixing a lot of natural horsemanship also with safety. So she always asks people the least amount of pressure, is the ask. And so one of the things that she had to actually train our team a lot on, because we were kind of at path centers, or holding this, and you got your carrot stick, and come on horse, that kind of thing. And she was really like, you need to actually model, how are you approaching the horse, and what are you asking before? So one of the things that you did a lot with us was training us a little bit more on that.
How does someone else feel when you're with the horse? And if I'm over there rushing because I'm in a hurry, I know that creates anxiety. So I'm like, you can do it, just do it a little slower with a little more intention. We don't talk about things like, oh, that horse might have a sniffle, that horse may be off a little. Is the girth tight enough? Any of those things just bring up that threat response so fast for the people. So we're like, no, bring it to us quietly. We'll make all the rearrange things as needed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So that's a really good point, right? Is it a need to know, and you're teaching and training, so you've got to know your client, right? Some need to know the information, and you can see that probably they're the ones with the binders for the doctors, and they've had all the history and all of that. Those clients might be paired up with an equine specialist who is more talkative and who is going to, walk through that, and hey, you want to try this inch, and let's do it slowly. Nobody likes their belt jammed. And then they'll also be like, oh yeah, actually when I was cleaning my child's wounds, or, when I'm helping, my father, or and that will start to practice how you treat the horse is then how you treat that. And when do people become overwhelmed? Like, sometimes I'm like, hey, I've never used this saddle before. Like, let me get somebody who knows what they're doing. That is a really neat, vulnerable place to be in, where I'll be like, you know what? This actually, Brenda's got some great saddles, and I'm gonna just ask her. And instead of always having to fake it, this population, healers and caregivers, you do not fake it till you make it. Absolutely not. That is like that. You'll never get clients, right? You've got to be really in the moment. So anything else you want to add about kind of when you're assessing the horses and deciding who's in or out? Because sometimes she'll be like, Beauty just needs a little bit of hay. And then she's like, oh, did you see that? And I was like, oh, no.
Or yeah. maybe a horse is restless because their buddy got took out. Even all my stalls are alongside the arena, so that we take a buddy and we tie it in front of that other horse, so that we're not creating any anxiety for the horse that got left in the stall. We'll rearrange the horses that are left in stalls so they have a buddy. All my stalls have a grate, so anyone can have a buddy, and a solid wall so they don't feel like they have to have two buddies. And when we saddle up a whole bunch of horses, we move slowly and deliberately. Drives Tara a little bit nutty.
It does, yeah.
But it's still kind of a rhythm and a flow, and everything always works out.
It does, yeah. Or worse, the way it's supposed to work out, right? So, errors, or, you just be honest about that, like, hey, these are sentient beings, and oops, let's fix it, notice that. The buddy system is actually really interesting. A lot of places don't want the horses to get buddy sour, right? So there kind of is that, you gotta, they've got to figure it out. And sometimes there is going to be distress tolerance. Like, it's okay that, Susie the horse is, a little upset. So let's move on. I've got about 5 minutes left. Another place, but just quickly on buddies. In the military, has anyone ever heard of battle buddy? Okay, so that's the same idea. Is you use the language that's familiar with that. Caregivers, same thing. Medical institutions, same thing. Law enforcement, you're always attached with a radio, so you're not alone. And so that's the idea of the power of the herd, and we reinforce that. Another place that we're doing it with, Brockton, VA, is in Massachusetts. It's the women's integrated treatment and recovery center, as well as military sexual trauma. There's only about 8 or so in the country that have specific 8-week inpatient. And we started doing it with them about 3 years ago, and all of a sudden the nurses and the social workers and the psychiatrist and the director, they all started showing up. So, I think about 2 months ago, we all thought we only had 3 patients coming, and we actually had 7 people that, wanted to be a part of the program. So that shows us, they needed services really badly. And they were willing to be vulnerable enough to be like, I've never been on a horse, I'll be embarrassed with the clients. So that is the post-traumatic growth model, right? That the healers and the caregivers are now into giving back and experiencing and working with. All right. Next one that's doing it really well. Look up Elizabeth Dole Foundation, Senator Dole's spouse, amazing woman in her own right. They're doing it right. So they have an entire thing on hidden heroes, caregivers, what this looks like. And they're a lot like HHRF, where they're not necessarily doing and facilitating. They do have programs, but what they have is a research repository, data and information, huge, big people in legislation about what does this look like. So they want very much what we've been talking about all day, best practice, evidence-based, identify the barriers, financial, social, emotional. Last one is families. Don't forget the families. A lot of 11-year-olds are actually caregivers. Maybe if, dad goes to the grocery store and, are there alone with grandpa for 4 hours. So do not forget those kids. We've had, 14-year-olds who are actually working a job because mom couldn't work because she's a caregiver for her veteran. So don't forget the families. Children are not my wheelhouse, so we always bring in other people who are really good with that and know that, right? So, I start quirky, a little bit with the kids, and I'm like, mine are grown and gone, and thank God, I was a Cub Scout leader for too long, right? So know your skill set. God bless all of you who are working with kids, but also know that, is this what I can do? So we want to open it up a little bit to questions. Angie is a veteran, and I'd like her to be able to open herself to this. She's also the caregiver for her husband, who's a veteran. So she got really involved with us about 3 years ago, and has seen and walked the talk. So it's really important. What you'll notice about our team, and many that aren't here are veterans, are spouses of veterans. One, she was supposed to come and co-present with us, but her husband's getting deployed tomorrow? November 3rd, 3 years. Family separation. They have to sell their house, right? Like, that's the military. So, how do we now support, one of our staff who's dealing with a military separation? So, I want to open it up to you guys, see if anybody has any thoughts or questions, or please find us at Tryon, but we'll certainly be drinking, so just put that, no, I'm just kidding. It's actually really fun, we were there last night. Actually, I'm talking too much about wine and this stuff, but anybody have any questions for any of us, for all of us? Yeah, any of us, all of us, please. Oh, it was that good that actually I answered every question. Anybody have any experience with caregivers? Or yeah, go ahead, Elizabeth.
I was just curious about, oh gosh, you're filming me. I was curious about just thinking about how you guys work. There's side conversations, like checking in, like you're talking about, making sure that everybody so how do you fit that in with, like, there was the presentation earlier today that was saying, like, really don't do side conversations, and like there's a dynamic there, and I'm kind of curious about how you walk that path.
So we're very different than Man of War, and I love Jody. We've known each other. I've been at Bergen Equestrian, and we've done tons of stuff together with Brave Hearts and all of that. So Man of War is a manualized, structured, 90-minute, 8 weeks. You must do this on session 1, you must do this on session 2. And that's really important in the industry. We are an immersion program. So yes, I do have clients that we see 1 hour once a week type of thing, but that's really for that continuity of care piece, the follow-up, so it's not like the huge, mountaintop experience. It's, wow, we had a great day. But what we found was that, that first 15 minutes, everybody's getting their wiggles out and their nerves out and kind of like, where's the coffee and all of that. The second hour is kind of, just getting to know the horse. The third hour is now actually I'm starting to build that flexibility and coping, and kind of now I've connected with a horse, I'm connecting with my sidewalker, my equine specialist, I'm connecting now with other people in the group. We just had lunch together. So we actually do full immersions. So Friday, sometimes they come around 4 p.m. and stay with us until Sunday. So we have lodging, we do the whole thing. A lot happens in your pajamas around a bonfire, let me tell you that. So we have found with this population, no matter how structured and controlled we want it to be, you're client-centered and horse-based. You are going to get what shows up at that door. And that door might have a gun in their glove compartment, and that door might have had, gotten fired. That door, you don't know. And so our team can step in and be flexible enough. All the people in substance abuse always find their way to Linda. All the people who, have had serious traumatic experiences find their way to Kelly. So is it that we tell our story? Not necessarily, but they'll get to know us enough that they are invested in what we call the farm family. So now they have a buy-in to community, and they get to that higher level of connection and competence and all of that. So we get a lot of people that want to come back and volunteer, honestly, and that was really difficult because you still have a therapeutic alliance. They can't see you totally behind the curtain of Oz. However, you're missing out on an incredible population of doers and givers. So Angie's actually in charge of what we now have as the Veteran Outreach Specialist. And so we probably have, 10 or so. Gold Star family, Gold Star parents. Actually that guy who was terrified of the stallion in his 6-foot stall is, a canine sergeant now, and he's with it. So we have a lot of different people who are now Veteran Outreach Specialists who, are on the team, wear team jackets and represent and talk about it in their vet centers and their groups. However, go on our, I didn't load it in here. Go on our website, EQUINE Immersion Project, and you'll see we have like a 7-minute video of a bunch of people. Some of them might be on a try-on again, but you'll hear the testimonials from them. One is a combat veteran, one is a sexual trauma, one is an active, so you'll see one, we've stayed with since 2016 and in and out of jail, and now, really a big part of it. And you get what you get, right? That's what it is. So you're absolutely right. That kind of.
I think maybe she was talking about us as a team, and we process check through the day. We have a meeting room where we go and say, "How's it going? What are you seeing?" Because you can't have eyes everywhere.
Right.
So you're working with, and we try very hard to do one-on-one to have enough people and enough layers, so that what did you see with that person and that horse, and to see if that relationship's working out, if we need to mix something up.
If we have a group of 8, we typically have a staff of 10 and probably 12 horses. If we have a group of 16, double that. So it's a lot of food.
And we have a lot of food.
Yeah, and some of those roles are very clear. One time Angie was like just in the kitchen and just paperwork, and everyone knew kitchen and paperwork was Angie's role that time. Another time Angie's out with the horses. So we really, as we're going, is who's stepping into what. You have something else to add?
I was gonna say, we've also learned how to just read each other's body language, nonverbal cues. Like, we know we also, when somebody absolutely needs extra help, we pull somebody in. If I see somebody's kind of really spiraling, it might be I try to divert the conversation for as long as I can, and then I try and at least maybe get Linda, who's floating around. Linda, go get Tara to come over here, please. I gotta ask her a question. And then Tara gets looped in. She's the therapist. Beyond my scope.
Right, and if it's a caregiver and family, beyond my scope. I don't know that experience. That goes to Kelly, right? If it's, all of that. But we also, there'll be times where Linda comes out into the arena and she's like, "You're talking fast. Take a sip of water. Slow it down." And so she'll give me that kind of feedback, anchoring me, because she's a healer, right? So she's healing the healer, and we'll just start to really gauge in on that. So like Amanda War said, know your team, hang out together, have fun, because that will then really show the community what you can offer.
Take a 15-hour road trip.
Yeah, we drove down from New Hampshire together and we're still getting along. Yeah, go ahead.
You imagine 1 horse per client, or is it 2 clients per horse? How do you do that?
Really depends. We have a lot of choice. Some couples will be like, I do not want to hang out with my spouse at all. Is she riding? Okay, I'm going to do groundwork. You know, is he hiking with the horse in hand? Okay, I'm riding. That's choice. Some want to work with the same horse. And sometimes they'll even groom the same side together, or they'll groom the other side, and then it's my side's better than your side, and you know, you couldn't get the back foot, and you know. So it's really, again, choice. So you need to have enough depth in your program that those choices are there. It's hard. It's really, really hard.
How do you do your measuring of like your pre and post testing, or how do you measure your outcomes?
Really good question. So it depends on who our funders are typically. So we started with Home Base, which is a Mass General Hospital program, #1 psychiatric hospital in the world, right? So those were some pretty strict measurements, great data, really good outcomes. However, not everybody has access to Harvard, and we usually don't. So then do we try to create our own? We did that, where we would then have something that was reliable and valid, measuring choice, connection, communication, you know, competency and all of that. But that's not validated. So, you know, all of us in our own centers are doing our own evaluations, but nothing's standardized. So imagine the data we would have if we all had the same evaluation. We'd have, you know, thousands of data points by the end of the year. Also, so you look for standardized protocols. So are you trying to do symptom relief? You should not be doing the PCL for military, right? That's the therapist's inventory. And so why do you need to know how many flashbacks they had this week? Why are you asking that? Ask yourselves that. Is that for a funder? Is that just because you're curious? You know, do you really want to know then, is it symptom relief? Like, are you sleeping better? Okay, so now we're getting the physical, the social, emotional, all of that. So when you're doing your evaluations, you need to know what your funders and what your grant was for, and then you need to know, why am I measuring this? And what is the impact going to be? What am I going to do with the information? So it depends, and I'm happy to share any of it. I'm happy to share grants I've written, anything. This is not a competition. This is a collaboration. There's enough healing to go around. We'll share anything. So please contact us, any of the stuff that we have. The more people that get to horses, the better. Yeah.
This is a bit of a broader question, but for those of us who are not very familiar with veteran culture, but want to learn, where's the best place to start?
Great question, and thank you so much for asking that. So, just like I said, I'm not great with kids. I shouldn't be running a kids program, right? So if I have a family program, we bring in people that are either school psychologists or really good with, you know, all that type of thing. One of the guys is a leader with a master chief, or what is he?
Master chief.
Yeah, and outward bound instructor with teens and stuff like that. So he takes all the kids and I'm like, oh my God, I can't pay you enough, right? So know your scope. So trauma-informed care and military cultural competency should be two things that you absolutely do. We're happy to share send you our slides, train you in it, any of it. Go and talk to some veterans. Like, go to the VFW and be like, hey, can you tell me, what do you need? What New Hampshire has the most veterans per capita, and we're a really veteran family or friendly state. But if your state and your community doesn't have a huge veteran community for 100 miles around, why are you gonna run a veterans program? Right? So you need to know these things about your community. Is it a young veteran population? Is there a base nearby? So families might be the way to get that in there. So if you don't know it, that is fine. I mean, I'm not a veteran, and I right away say, that I bring in a different set. But if you need that peer-to-peer, that's really important. So awesome question. Yeah, and we're happy to share with you that. PATH has great trainings on it. The Equine Services for Heroes Committee I'm on, I'm doing a talk November 18th or something with that, and then PATH has modules on trauma-informed care that's done by Megan Hill McQueenie, who's in charge of Bravehearts. She's a rock star. Yeah. So that's a really good one. Yeah, she's super fun. So there is information available on trauma-informed care and military cultural competency. Psych Armor is a website, free, and it is constantly sending out stuff about, hey, what's going on with Afghanistan, how to respond to that and what to say or not say. And they do it like with cute cartoons and, because they know their audience. So, anything else?